Um, it was a very important book because one of the things that it did was it led to a few different pieces of legislation that we still have today. A lot of us, for any product that we have, I'm drinking this water, we still have, for an example, we have things that obviously say labels that tell us what's in our food, and that's what Upton Sinclair's book eventually had. So this was an important book. In fact, President Teddy Roosevelt read it, and it alarmed him to the point where it actually spurred Congress to act. And all Congress read it too. It's like everybody just couldn't believe that their meat would not be safe. When I bring the primary source on Wednesday, we'll read that. We'll read this one part together, and you guys will be like, "Whoa!" Really? So let me fast forward past this. And the book really hit America in the stomach, so to speak. Right? Hey, this is your first vegan. I don't know. They're like, you need to properly inspect meat. But certainly there was kind of a movement to boycott the meat industry. It's either make it change or boycott it. There was also, and this is a pretty disgusting photo, but this is kind of like, look at that, splitting backbone, Swift and Company. That just grosses me out. What they would do to actually discover if the meat was safe is they would use something called the poke and sniff method, which sounds as disgusting as it really is. Like where these guys walk around and they go, oh, let's see if that meat's safe, and then they get a little metal prick, I guess, or they just stick it in the meat and then smell it. And that's how they determined if the meat was actually safe to be packaged and sent to a market. Yeah, that's just, yeah. So the Impact of the Jungle is probably one of the first pieces of progressive legislation to come out, and that is the Meat Inspection Act, requiring the United States Department of Agriculture to actually have people at the factory site to actually discover better what the meat is safe or not. And we're not talking about poking and sniffing. You're talking about somebody whose job it is to fully devote to giving a visual inspection and a chemical inspection too, okay? And people that oversee the whole process to basically regulate what these companies are doing. Because if these companies are left up to their own devices, you can imagine what they're going to put out there. And people, America was pretty much a nation of meat eaters. I wouldn't say vegetarianism had taken over, like it is right now. Maybe it's not. Upton Sinclair, the author of The Jungle, was a lifelong vegetarian too. I don't know if perhaps that had something to do with him writing about this. But just to tell you another example of how unclean the whole thing was, back in the day, you would have these guys that their job was to slaughter the cows or the lambs or the pigs or whatever, and they wouldn't even use gloves. It was just hands. And imagine how many hands are touching each of the meat on the assembly line, right? It's like, I cut off my leg, I'm passing it to you so you can take out the inner organs, and then you guys cut off the head, you know what I mean? And so pretty much there's all these people touching it. And how do you establish cleanliness in a situation like that? It's very difficult. So the Meat Inspection Act made it a little bit better in terms of that. And it didn't just encompass meat too. We also have a situation here where basically, and I should know this because I used to work at a packing shed out in Reedley. We used to have a guy come from the USDA to inspect the quality of the fruit that we were packing. just to make sure it was safe. We're talking about the whole food industry. It starts with meat, but it encompasses every part of the food production process to make sure that our food supply is safe. Because as Americans, we want to make sure our food's safe. The last thing you want to have in your life is, some kind of stomach virus or near-death experience because you got a parasite wiggling around in your tummy. That's just disgusting. I'm sorry. Also, another thing that came out of the jungle is the Pure Food and Drug Act, which is basically making sure that the key word there is labeled, banning the sale of impure or falsely labeled food or drugs. Just make sure that, if whatever you buy in America now has a label with calories on it, with nutritional information, all of that is the Pure Food and Drug Act. If that law didn't exist, you would not actually have labels on your food or anything that you buy. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing to really know what you're getting into, especially these days. I would argue that Americans today, 100 years later after this, wouldn't you guys agree with me that most people in this country are very much health conscious these days about the kind of stuff that's in their food? Whether it's cholesterol, whether it's trans fat, calorie count, all that kind of stuff, right? It hasn't always been like that, but certainly over the last few years. But this is a good start. Very good start. So that's the impact of the jungle. And those are some of the first pieces of progressive legislation. Let's highlight Ida Tarbell a little bit and her impact as well. So we talked about Jacob Riis, we talked about Upton Sinclair. Ida Tarbell was a woman who really was kind of scary, especially for folks who were in big business. And because she just wrote this scathing, I'll click on all this stuff and then talk about it. Her book, The History of the Standard Oil Company, is a scathing expose. I mean, it just rips apart John D. Rockefeller, limb from limb almost. Just saying all the dirty things that he's done in the past. Whether he's, put other companies out of business, or whether he's price gouged the consumers, it's bad. It's bad. And really, she was one of those people that was to be feared because of all the things that she wrote. And that tells you the power of somebody who has an agenda that's writing about these things. You think about today, like who are some of the writers, or some of the people that blog, or some of the people that are influential reporters and tweeters, are they going to call it that? Think about them. Think about who you trust, or it was like that back then. But Ida Tarbell was one of those. And the impact of her book was not that the government didn't really pass any laws that were really, I'm going to say, against big business necessarily, but it did influence the way that government thought about big business. Like maybe because of the things Standard Oil Company is doing as a corporation who's trying to put other people out of business, maybe we should start to pass laws that maybe enforce the antitrust acts, or maybe do other things like that. So that's kind of what Ida Tarbell was all about in her impact. And these are some cool cartoons about, she didn't actually draw these cartoons, but this is kind of like what her book is about, is the power of money, the power of oil money, whether it's controlling our government or controlling our citizens or whatever it is. And you gotta wonder, how true is this today, right? Do we still have a situation in this country where the oil companies dominate everything? I mean, think about that. It's not much has changed. That's a very famous cartoon there, the Standard Oil octopus. I show my kids that and they crack up. They're like, what's that? It's an octopus. I know, but anyways, I have to explain it to them. It's no fun when your dad's a history teacher. Okay, this might be the part where I'm gonna end and talk about the thought paper and also pass back the quizzes because I want to make sure I utilize the time effectively. So there's all kinds of ways to make government better. And I'm going to talk about one of the ways that the United States, through the progressive movement, tried to make government more responsible. Let's contrast with the Gilded Age a little bit. In the Gilded Age, you had political bosses, right, that would kind of do things for certain people, and there was money involved, and bribes, and corruption, and presidential administrations were full of corruption and stuff. So in order to keep government accountable, one of the things that's very important for you to understand is that, I'll talk about this, it's called the city manager form of government. And this is what Fresno has. The way it used to work in the Gilded Age was you would have a mayor, and the mayor's office would control all of the money coming in from the taxes. Okay, so, and then you would have district representatives, okay, on the city council. And the city council members and the mayor's office, there wasn't a clear understanding of who was spending and how the money was, where it was coming and what it was being used for. Having a city manager is very important because if I go to this, you guys can copy all that down. No, I'm just kidding. Just get the big idea here, okay? Where it says city manager, okay? That person basically controls the tax money and accounts for all of the tax money coming in so that the mayor and the commissioners, and in our case, in the city of Fresno, we have a city council seat. So I guess in Fresno, you can cross off commissioner and put city council seats. To make it so that the city manager controls what is being spent. And that the mayor and the city council members don't have unlimited access to funds. Because what was happening in the Gilded Age was all the money was being concentrated in the hands of the mayor and the city council members, and there was not a lot of accountability or transparency. See, nowadays in the city of Fresno, if you want to know how much the city of Fresno is actually taking in, that's public information, and that's done by the city manager. In our city, that's pretty much how we do it. We have a mayor, Ashley Swearingen. We have a whole bunch of city council members that basically do that work. And so it makes government a little bit more accountable so that you know what's going on. I encourage all of you guys, if you ever want a great time on a Thursday night, go check out the city council because it's hot and, you know, you might have one or two people in the audience, you know, and one of those is going to be a reporter. You can go check it out. I'm just kidding. Maybe you shouldn't do that. You can always watch it on cable too, like my mother-in-law. Anyways, I'm going to stop right there before I get myself in trouble. Okay, we're going to stop right there.